Historias inspiradoras de mujeres y hombres que desde diversas realidades se convirtieron en verdaderos agentes de cambio. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a Innovadores Invisibles.
Our immediate circumstances, but also the ones in which we are embedded in, our neighborhoods, our territories, our families, closing our eyes and increasing the frustration, malaise for the next generation.
Hi all, thank you very much for listening to a new chapter in Inequality in Focus. Now we are with María Luisa Méndez. She is one of the leaders of the COES. She is going to tell us what this means, what they do, but first of all we have to know who is María Luisa. So María Luisa, who is María Luisa?
Hi Sebastián, hi everyone. Thank you so much for this conversation. María Luisa Méndez is my name, of course, and I'm a sociologist. I'm a Chilean sociologist. I'm also an academic at the Catholic University in Chile at the Institute of Urban Studies. So I'm an urban sociologist. I'm also director of the Center for Social Conflict and Cohesion Studies in Chile. This is a major center of research within the social sciences, pioneer in the study of cohesion and inequalities and social conflict. I'm also a mother of two daughters and a very enthusiastic academic, sociologist, hopefully intellectual, that aims to look critically at the major challenges of our contemporary societies. Among them, the tensions in relation to social mobility, the reduction of inequalities, wealth inequality among them, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Como nos cuenta María Luisa, desde el quehacer del COES en movilidad social, desigualdad y cohesión social, tiene una significancia muy especial para quien la estudia, ya que su historia de vida sería el primer objeto de estudio como referencia personal por lo que ha vivido. Escuchemos parte de esto.
How this was born? Why you have this interest, something in your life, your family? Why you start this field of study?
Well, that's a very, very profound and interesting question. Thank you so much for addressing this more biographical aspect. Well, there is a very personal aspect related to what I'm interested in, and it has to do with the fact that I'm someone that started studying at the university level during the first years of democracy in Chile in the early 90s. So I studied my early years, at school during dictatorship in a very open school, but also we suffered the tensions of coexisting among people that didn't think, along the same political lines, right? So from early on in my life, I noticed that the division in terms of politics was very strong on the one hand, and we had major challenges, I'm talking about the 80s, right, in addressing those differences. So that has been something that has been present throughout my life, as I was saying, as a challenge in terms of promoting debates, dialogues that aim to, overcome those difficulties, those differences. And on the other hand, I'm someone that comes from a background of a family that has different trajectories. On the one hand, on my mother's side, my grandmother came from the south of Chile. She was quite poor. She didn't attend school. She was she was a very strong woman, but so she managed to work very hard. When she came here to Santiago, she got married very early and had 5 children, and she ended up having she had a small business in La Florida, in the south of Chile, in the south of Santiago. So that she was someone that inspired me very much for that trajectory. I think that that's the longest upward mobility trajectory that I'm familiar with, because she overcame those strong differences in terms of gender, territory, ethnicity, and obviously class, social class. And on my dad's side, they were very, very poor, very, he was the first professional in his family. And so for me, it's a matter of understanding that one's biography has strong and profound connections with the country's biography as well. And those things that we experience as personal unrest, malaise, trauma are issues that are connected to the more, the larger society, and we should not think that it's individual problems that affect us, but it's also collective ones. So my interest in social mobility is to understand it as not as an individual trajectory with ups and downs, but also an issue that is experienced collectively, right? So more or less that's where I am now. And
your story, and also it's interesting to think that what you are studying right now is something that you live in first person of your family, what you share about your mother, your father, and I believe that this gives you a different approach how to get to people, how you're going to approach to these studies, and also the functional of the information that you're going to raise during these studies, how this is going to be used in different areas. So can you share some of the examples that you told us that in the 80s these people cannot gather together, or in the 90s when you start going to university, people gathering together of different worlds is something that was not so common, because people of different.
Continuing a little bit on the biographical side, I think that now that we're discussing this, both my parents, as I was telling you, were the first professionals, the first people to study at the university level from their families, more or less, but the first generation, and they both were social workers. They studied at the Universidad of Chile, and so I grew up in a family that was very much connected to major social problems in our society, and my parents' work also helped me understanding that dialogue, mutual understanding, mutual problems as human beings are the key aspects in which we connect, right? I mean, we all suffer from love, illnesses, we all love our families. We all think that we want to have a vision of a better future for us, for our beloved ones as well. So in a way, my understanding of sociology, my discipline, also is embedded in that sense. So I was very touched when you invited me to the event where you gave the recognition.
The ceremony when the local entrepreneurs pitched their work.
Absolutely. That was very touching. But they were not talking about only their biographies. They were talking about ethnicity, gender issues, territorial segregation, enormous challenges that we've got as societies.
So what is the difference of what you have studied between urban and rural areas? Of these conflicts are different, are approached in a different way, or is similar in terms of what you have studied already?
Well, that's a very important issue, right? I mean, at this stage of my trajectory, I would say that we've got obviously common challenges at a more, I would say, structural level, right? Because the ways in which we have, certain challenges for cities, for example, segregation or gentrification or territorial stigma, are more particular of, this kind of territorial formation, right? Whereas in the rural areas, possibly there are other issues that are more, particular of those areas. But in a way, I'm trying to say that, or I see myself as an urban sociologist, because I think that cities, well, this is not me, it's the long tradition of urban sociologists speaking, but we have put so many expectations and aspirations in cities, migration to cities, looking for a place to live, work, to be recognized, to have a future, to have a political also recognition, etc. You know, to have at least the chance to develop a new identity, you know, in terms of whatever you want to construct. But cities, as we know them, have not been able to fulfill all those aspirations, expectations, and also promises, right? So I think that especially in societies like our societies, in which we know that the concentration of opportunities happened in cities and not in the rural areas, right? So I think that in that sense, I mean, in the tension between prosperity and frustration, is that I'm trying to understand what happens in contemporary cities. And when I talk about cities, I talk about, you know, the smallest scale, which is housing, neighborhood, city, you know, because we live in a trajectory that moves throughout these different scales.
Ciudades no han podido satisfacer las expectativas que mucha gente tiene desde estos espacios, con una presión importante no solo por trabajo, seguridad, etc., sino por aspectos de cohesión social que cada vez se ven más distintos, aun cuando la tecnología podría hacernos pensar de que estamos cada vez más cerca, reflejando una tensión entre prosperidad y frustración.
And in terms of rural areas, that's part of the challenges that we have to address now, because rural areas, and of course you know this better than me, have changed enormously, right? And we still think them in more traditional ways, right?
Rural areas, not farming.
No, not anymore. Of course, not anymore. And obviously, it's much more explicit, the ways in which people resent not being seen, not being recognized, right? Not being addressed when we discuss social, you know, problems in Chile. Obviously, the issues of exclusion are still present, but in a different way. I mean, we've talked about the gender aspects of exclusion, inclusion in the rural areas, for example, in relation to gender violence, you know, independence from autonomy from women. These are more contemporary aspects that we are not looking at more specifically, more clearly.
Do you believe that something changed after the pandemic in this aspect because of the migration to rural areas, hybrid work? Something is moving over there, or you believe that we continue in the same path?
Well, it has changed, and this is something that some of my colleagues are studying. For example, the migration towards rural areas, for example, especially in the south of Chile, Puerto Varas and other parts, you know, and the development of new division of land, right? People are moving to what we know the parcelas, right? The smaller scale in which you can live in a rural area, and it has caused tensions with like local residents. There is a whole challenge in terms of the use of water, the intensity of use of other, you know, services, the hybridity of these areas. Are they rural or are they now a bit urban within the rural, right?
A mix.
And we have to learn a lot about that, yes.
Las capacidades de carga, la falta de ordenamiento territorial, el desarrollo rápido sin planificación pueden mermar y cambiar no solo dinámicas sociales en un territorio rural, sino también su ecosistema ambiental en el cual se encuentra inmerso.
We saw and lived together in this ceremony was the gender inequalities that rural areas face. And one of the biggest challenge is the autonomy of women in terms of economic, and that's one of the manifestations of inequalities. So how and what happened when women start getting more money or autonomy in terms of income? They say, I don't want this guy to be by my side, I want this to be by my own, and they start a new life. And we have seen this through Balloon in different regions because of this specific aspect that maybe not all of the people relate economic autonomy with gender violence. So which are the mix of different inequalities that you have studied, that you have seen during this period of study?
Well, I mean, this is something that I have learned from the excellent work of my colleagues that not only work in rural areas, but also some of my colleagues that work in migration studies as well, right? And the issue of independence, autonomy, and also on the other extreme, economic violence is present throughout these different situations. Women that are migrating, women that develop their own projects, you know, that develop different kind of competencies as well, right? We saw women that started their small businesses in handicrafts, in, you know, I mean, amazing work. But yeah, I mean, what we see in these studies and also the experience is that obviously economic violence has to do with control, right? And it's control not only of your partner or you know, someone's partner, but also within families that tend to be quite traditional in those terms. So it's a situation in which women have been in a way unable to develop their own trajectories because of their socialization in their early years, as well as what they do in adult life.
María Luisa nos da cuenta de cómo las estructuras sociales han cambiado, y por más que hoy podamos decir en base a números o cifras que han salido gente de la línea de la pobreza y están en clase media, el grado de vulnerabilidad para volver a esa condición es importante y preocupante, siendo uno de los mayores desafíos y preocupaciones de quienes han logrado avanzar en la movilidad social. Pero, ¿qué es movilidad social y cómo se da? Esa es una respuesta que nos va a dar María Luisa.
Social mobility has to do, I mean, a broad definition is about changes in the position, not only in terms of material resources, but also symbolic resources. It's what you have, but also how you are seen in a
symbolic part.
Yes, for example.
How you are seen by others.
By others, exactly. How, for example, your lifestyle, your manners, the place where you live is valued by others or not.
How do you relate this social mobility with meritocracy, how they are linked?
So meritocracy was, as we describe it in sociology, a repertoire for justifying the differences. So the differences wouldn't appear as having lack of justice, you know, unfair, but legitimate in terms of, you know, the efforts and obviously the talents, you know, the investment of education and, you know, hard work that people would do, and so the output that they would have in terms of positioning themselves in different scales of the social structure. So every system, obviously, that would distribute resources would need, you know, a repertoire, a discourse, a cultural understanding of inequality, because the ones in which we live in obviously are rather hierarchical, although we also see ourselves as egalitarian societies, but there are different positioning. So what happened is that with the increase of, I would say, what it has been described as the broken elevator of social mobility, right, and education. That means that the difficulties of, you know, bringing more population, larger parts of the population into new positions, you know, that brought together.
But it's a justification of that realize that the promise is not being achieved is because they don't have been putting so much effort?
No, I think, I mean, what I want to say is that, in my view, what happened first is that people realize that those expectations that they had were not being fulfilled, and that happens for objective reasons, right? Because, as we were saying, education in terms of quality, there are exactly the labor market, you know, also has many challenges, etc. But then how that is experienced subjectively also involves a lack of I would say, trust in the meritocratic discourse as well. So that's what we are experiencing now. And we've seen in COES, for example, we have a panel survey, and we have seen how meritocracy is experienced more critically among populations, and especially over the past 8 years, right? So people are less open to saying that they believe in the meritocratic system. For example, that they receive, recognition in terms of what they give, that this is a fair society, etc., etc. So that unrest is something that we saw for a long time as rather, vague in terms of, there was no political expression, but the unrest, the malaise, the uncomfortable situations were there, and we saw it as sociologists, right? But then we had, in 2019, the social political crisis, and it appeared more publicly. But it has come for a long time manifested in different social movements, for example, right, of students, or in terms of the environment as well, gender issues, etc., etc. So I think that the problem now is how to reconcile a society that still has expectations of social mobility, that those expectations obviously are not going to meet the objective, chances, and in a way, obviously, we need to think, obviously, what are the possibilities to offer, those pathways, those avenues, rather than closing our eyes and increasing the frustration, malaise, for the next generation. I think that that's something that it's the clock is clicking now, and we will see. We already saw, right, some of the expressions of that frustration.
Okay, well, María Luisa, thank you very much for sharing your story, your knowledge, and also thank you for talking about inequalities, social mobility, and meritocracy, and so many things that we have shared during this conversation. So thank you very much, and hope all the people that are listening and seeing this chapter of Inequality in Focus could learn and also share what you have already said to us. So thank you very much.
IJURR Latam es una empresa B que reduce las brechas de desigualdad en la ruralidad, potencia la cohesión social a través del desarrollo de proyectos locales, espacios de vinculación y diálogo, haciendo que las comunidades sean protagonistas de su propio desarrollo. Pueden encontrar más información en www.ijurrlatam.com o seguirnos en nuestras redes sociales como IJURR Latam, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn y Facebook. Productor ejecutivo y voz en off, Juan Ignacio Cordero. Audiovisual, Ismael Contreras. Conducción, Sebastián Salinas Claro. Marketing y comunicación, equipo IJURR Latam junto a equipo Fundación Julius Baer. Traducción, equipo Julius Baer.
Our vodcast series, Innovadores Invisibles, Voices of Progress, features inspirational stories of people who built impactful solutions that changed their lives. This collaboration is an important part of addressing wealth inequality, people who share with us their journey of upward social mobility. This is a collaboration created by IJURR Latam and the Wealth Inequality Initiative by Julius Baer Foundation. The Wealth Inequality Initiative by Julius Baer Foundation is a globally collaborative platform to awaken interest in wealth inequality, to circulate knowledge, to mobilize stakeholders, and to drive action towards more equitable solutions. Be part of our community, and together, let's embrace the role of change makers.